Hello and welcome to another edition of the Orioles Minor League Podcast. My name is Adam Pohl. I am the voice of the Bowie Bay Sox and happy to be your host here over the next 20 to 30 minutes as we take a look back at a brief but outstanding Orioles minor league career that came to an end this week. Also on this podcast, we're going to get up to date on the happenings of the last week of Orioles baseball in the minor leagues with our minor league expert, Dean Jones Jr. But first, our featured conversation of the week, and it is with Norfolk Tides beat writer David Hall. In this conversation, David and I touch on Dave's past in the game of baseball. We discuss the unique challenges on the plate of manager Ron Johnson with the Norfolk Tides, and we talk about how Christian Walker is adjusting to life as an outfielder this year in Norfolk. It is so great to welcome into the podcast one of my great friends in the game of baseball, and it's incredible that we are both in the Orioles organization, David Hall. How are you doing, Dave?
Doing great, Adam. Always great to hear your voice.
Now, David Hall is the Norfolk Tides beat writer for the Virginian-Pilot, and we met what would now be 11 years ago. I was covering the Salem Avalanche, a team that no longer exists. Of course, Salem exists, but the Avalanche don't. They were the Astros Advanced A affiliate. We had Hunter Pence and Ben Zobrist on that team. And then you were writing for a paper that covered, as the beat writer, the Kinston Indians. And, of course, that team no longer exists. So we go back a little ways.
We're dinosaurs, Adam.
Kinston was such a special place, and of course I went to Frederick after 2 years in Salem, so I was with the Keys for a long time, and you were able to do some work with Baseball America. You covered Matt Wieters out of the gate as well, did a big story for them when he was upcoming, and I still remember that piece that you wrote.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, and I reminded Matt of that when the Orioles were here in Norfolk for an exhibition game a couple of years ago, and he remembered me. And when I was down in spring training this year, Matt, to my surprise, addressed me by name. So
wow.
We go back a ways.
Well, you did get a famous quote from the Keys manager at that time. It was 2008. His name's Tommy Thompson. And he would always say one of three things in an interview: that a player was gifted, that he was blessed, or that he was special. And you're the only person that got him to say all three in one sentence about one player. And it was Matt Wieters.
I think he added that the man upstairs took care of him or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, the last ever game in Kinston, North Carolina, there was a few guys that our listeners might have heard of, not only in the regular season but also in the playoffs, in the championship. The Frederick Keys' last title was in 2011, and it was against Kinston. And, of course, it was Manny Machado and Jonathan Scope that were so big and instrumental in the Keys winning that title. And, of course, now that's 5 years ago, and baseball, unfortunately, still has not returned at a professional level to Kinston, but that's quite a memory.
It is. I remember Manny hit a home run in the decisive game, and he was 19 years old. And after the championship game, or I guess it was it a 5-game series?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And it went all 5, and Frederick won in a romp in the last game, and the players were in the clubhouse celebrating, and Manny was named MVP of the series, and I wanted to interview him, so I went in there and grabbed him amidst the shower of champagne, took him outside the clubhouse, and interviewed him. And at the end of it, I turned the recorder off, and I said, "Manny, you're 19 years old. Do you feel bad that you can't celebrate the way your teammates are right now?" And he goes, "No, not really." And he took a sip of the beer he was holding.
That is great.
He inspired on that.
And, of course, he was in the big leagues, only a few months later, in August of the next season. But you've been covering the Tides now for a few years, and I know that you guys have just loved living in the Norfolk area. It really is a great city, isn't it?
It really is, especially where I live. I live in the downtown area, so I can walk to any kind of restaurant you can think of. So, plus it's a 3-minute walk to my office, which helps, and the ballpark's close by. And I also cover Norfolk State football and basketball, so that's also close. So everything's right here. In Kinston, everything was a 15, 20-minute drive away.
Yeah.
So now it's kind of the anti-Kinston.
Well, you got to go down to spring training this year also, and I've never been. That's one thing that working in baseball on the business side, that really February, March, they are crazy months trying to get those sponsorships in and such. Everyone always asks me, Adam, have you been to spring training? And they're almost surprised that when I tell them I have not. But you had it's a pretty cool laid back atmosphere down there, isn't it?
It is, and I did it for years when I was covering the Indians. I would go to Winter Haven, Florida every year, probably 7 or 8 straight years. And there I focused on the minor league side because I was covering A-ball. This year when I went down, most of the guys I needed to talk to were still in big league camp. So,
right.
Of the 5 days I was there, I think I only went to minor league camp once. And it's whatever people think about minor league spring training games is probably wrong. It's basically 4 fields back to back. Like from overhead, it looks like a 4-slice pizza. And there are games going on. There are foul balls flying all over the place. There's no audience. The only people there are Orioles employees and charting pitchers, that kind of thing. There's no scoreboard. There's no PA. There's no introduction. They just play baseball. And if a guy grounds out, they might say, "Get back in the box. We want to see you hit." So there are no rules, and they're just trying to get ready for a long season.
You and I each covered, Carolina League baseball for probably a decade or even longer. It is so different, even within the Orioles organization, being at AA. Here, the Bowie Bay Sox have many big league players like Julio Bourbon, Joey Turdoslavich, guys that have been in Norfolk. And the Tides, it is almost an extension of the major league team with the kind of experience the Orioles load the upper levels of the minors with.
It absolutely is an extension. And Ron Johnson, the manager here, says that all the time, that every guy in his clubhouse is the 26th man on the Orioles roster.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of finding the right situation. Like it happened recently with J.J. Hardy, and I'm sure that got the attention of some of the infielders here.
Oh, most definitely. And tell me about Ron Johnson, because many say that in the lifestyle of minor league baseball, or just baseball in general, one of the hardest jobs is to be a AAA manager, because you always have a bunch of grumpy players that all feel like they should be in the big leagues. And with the Orioles always having AAA being a lot of guys that have been in the big leagues and other organizations, and guys that can get called up and be ready to handle the show for a week or two if need be, it's a unique spot. It's
a totally unique job, and he is totally uniquely qualified and experienced to do it. And he's really good at it. I would argue he's as good as anybody in baseball. Buck Showalter certainly thinks that. Buck was here in January, I believe, to speak at some function, and I went and talked to him, and he raved about RJ, which is what everybody calls him.
Yeah.
And as well as the pitching coach Mike Griffin and the hitting coach Sean Barry. They're just they've all played in the major leagues. They've all done what these players are trying to do. So they really relate to them well. And RJ specifically, he says all the time, if a player's disgruntled or doesn't want to be here, he tells them that nothing is given to you in baseball. And if you play well, you'll get your shot. And that has certainly proven true in Baltimore.
What makes his personality so good for a AAA clubhouse?
He is as laid back as anybody you'll ever meet. To me, professional baseball requires a certain level of acquiescence. In other words, the schedule is what it is. Sometimes you have a 2-hour rain delay and you have to be on a plane the next day at 7 a.m. And he just has a way of not only rolling with it himself, but projecting that onto his players and encouraging them to do the same. So it's really a good fit.
We're here with David Pohl of the Virginia-Pilot, and he is the Norfolk Tides beat writer. And, of course, I know many listeners want to hear about some of these Tides. One of the big stories of the Tides at the start of the year is first baseman Christian Walker not being a first baseman anymore. And I think that some might think that is a little bit bizarre, but I think it shows that the Orioles really see Walker as a big league ball player, and they want to find in time a spot for him. Yeah,
they like his bat. He's got a major league bat, and they have a first baseman in Chris Davis, who they just signed for 7 years. And so, as I wrote, his signature might as well have been on the wall.
Right.
For that contract for Christian Walker. And Walker is embracing the move. He's noticeably improved already. I think the first couple of games you saw him get turned around a little bit on some balls, but now he's getting better jumps. And he told me the key. Not only Christian told me this, but the outfield coordinator Scott Beerer, who was in town recently. They both said that he'll know he's turned a corner when he can see a ball come off the bat, run to a spot, turn around and pick it up again and catch it. And that's when you're an infielder, you drift under balls, and you can't do that in the outfield. You gotta know immediately roughly where it's going to be, get a nice jump on it, take a straight angle toward the spot, and then pick up the ball. And that's what Major League outfielders do.
It's also a very tough ballpark to hit in. I know they moved the fences in a few years ago, but it's a lot of room to cover out there for a ball player like Walker, too.
It's also extremely windy. I've had players tell me that it's the worst place in America to hit, and that's not an exaggeration. I mean, that's what I think LJ Hose told me that down in Florida when I asked him about coming back here. And I've told people that learning to play the outfield in Norfolk is like learning to be a surgeon inside a bouncy castle. I mean, it's extreme. So if he can do it successfully here, he can do it anywhere.
Well, Trey Mancini, we were able to talk to him last week, and you look back at a guy like Brandon Snyder when he was coming up as a first baseman. He had huge numbers in Bowie. He hit well over 300. He hit for some power, and he went to Norfolk, and whether it was the ballpark or whatever, Brandon will tell you himself, the ballpark really got in his head. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Mancini handles it from an offensive standpoint because of the fact that he was a dominant player in AA.
Yeah, the thing about the ballpark here is that it's right on the water. It's on the Elizabeth River, and there's always wind. It's either blowing left or blowing right, and I've seen hundreds of balls that would be home runs elsewhere just die on the warning track because they get up above the stadium and the wind just pushes them back. So the players have to understand that that's going to happen, and when it does, they have to take the good away from having put a good swing on the ball,
right,
and be positive about that and not worry so much about the results, because these managers and coaches do post-game reports, and they're very honest in those reports, and they say he went 0 for 4, but in the third inning he hit a ball that's a home run anywhere else in America. So they just have to keep that in mind.
Dave, you talk about everybody, being possible to be that 26th man. We saw a lot of guys from the Tides bullpen, guys throughout the system like Tyler Wilson and Mike Wright and Oliver Drake make it up last year. And it really is an interesting number of arms in the bullpen this year that could be there for Baltimore if need be. And
they'll bring them up at the drop of a hat. I mean, that's what they're here for, and that's what they'll all tell you. I always like to tell this story. One afternoon, about 3:30, 4 o'clock, I was standing in the clubhouse here in Norfolk, and I was talking to T.J. McFarland, and he walked out the door, and I didn't think anything of it. Turned out he had been called up, and that night I'm sitting in the press box. There's a TV up there with the Orioles game on, and in about the 7th or 8th inning, the bullpen door opens in Yankee Stadium, and out walks the guy I was talking to just a few hours ago. It's that sudden. I also had the same experience with Tyler Wilson. Last season I went on the road with the Tides, rode on the bus just to do a story on how they travel. And there was a TV on the bus, and there was Tyler Wilson pitching in Baltimore. And the bus was headed to Scranton. We arrived in Scranton, got up the next day to go to the ballpark. We get on the bus, and there's Tyler Wilson back with his team. Wow. So it's that sudden. It's constant movement, and that's another thing that Ron Johnson handles very well.
Well, Dave, thank you so much for taking the time today. This has been fun to sit down and catch up. And I just think it's pretty incredible that we both ended up covering and being around Orioles teams, after all this time around professional baseball.
I know. I say it all the time that people would not believe how small a world baseball is. I mean, you mentioned, when we started, the feature I did for Baseball America on Matt Wieters. Well, the day I talked to Wieters in Kinston, the game got rained out, I think.
Okay.
It rained really hard, and I wanted to talk to one of his pitchers, and I couldn't get to the bus. It was raining so hard. And so you, being an employee of the Keys, I reached out to you. You hooked me up with one of the pitchers.
Yeah.
I talked to him on the phone, and that pitcher was Pedro Beato, who's now
right.
in the bullpen. So I told Pedro that story, and he kind of remembered it, but he thought it was pretty funny.
And he is probably one of the best guys that you can have around in the game. I think it's got to be nice for you covering AAA in that also. It's a lot different than those 22-year-olds in the Carolina League. You get guys that were boys and now are men, and it's nice to see that progression.
And it's nice to see so many guys I saw in the Carolina League.
Yeah.
I think it was last season the Tides had 6 players at one point who had played for Kinston while I covered Kinston.
Amazing.
It's bizarre. Like my first day on the job here, I walked into the Tides clubhouse on one end. In the other end, in walked Chris Jones, a left-hander, who
right.
I had in Kinston for 3 years. So we both looked at each other like, what are you doing here? He had just been traded from the Braves to the Orioles, and we arrived in that clubhouse at the same time.
That's really amazing. Well, thank you, Dave. Once again, we really appreciate it, and we'll talk again soon.
Always a pleasure, Adam. Thank you.
Weekly, before we talk to our minor league expert, Dean Jones Jr., we're going to take a look at one minor league story that may have slipped under the radar in the week that has preceded. And today, we want to highlight a player that had such a remarkable short career in the Orioles organization. Terry Doyle was signed as a minor league free agent prior to the 2015 campaign, and the 29-year-old right-handed starter ended up beginning the year on the Bowie Bay Sox inactive list. He traveled with the team, but he was one of 2 players that was not on the active roster. When he was finally activated, Doyle caught fire. And finally, by joining the Bay Sox rotation, Terry Doyle would see the Bay Sox win in each of his last 13 starts with AA Bowie. In August, he was promoted to AAA Norfolk and continued to pitch well. And all in all, Doyle was the winningest pitcher in the Orioles minor leagues last year. He went 16-2 with a 2.16 ERA, and he would end up starting the first Norfolk Tides playoff game as an Orioles affiliate. Doyle began this year with AAA Norfolk with an 0-4 record, and as the Orioles signed a few players, including Wandy Rodriguez this week, Terry Doyle was released by the Orioles organization. But what a year and change it was for the veteran right-hander. And now let's bring in our minor league expert, Dean Jones Jr. Dean, I hope you're having a good week. And I know you just heard my little piece there on Terry Doyle. What an incredible story. Great guy. 16-game winner, led the Orioles organization last year. And, it's tough to see him leaving the organization so early in this 2016.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Former 37th round pick, like you said, 16 wins last year. What a difference a year makes, though. 0-2, 5.87 ERA, and 4 starts for Norfolk this year. And like you said, it's always tough, especially this early in the year. And, we'll have to see what's next for him, but it just wasn't in the cards here in Baltimore with the Orioles organization.
Let's talk about some of the prospects, though, here this week. And, of course, big news about really what many feel is the Orioles' number 1 prospect, former first-round draft choice Hunter Harvey. And it's just been a tough few years for Hunter as far as injuries. Of course, this one, though, is not an arm injury. So, I don't know long-term as far as the ramifications hurting him. But he's going to be out for a little while.
Yeah, he had surgery Tuesday in Philadelphia, 4 to 6 weeks. More in addition to what he's already missed. He hasn't actually pitched in a game in July 2014 since July 2014.
Yeah.
What's interesting about that? I mean, when he's back, if he sticks to the timetable now, we're looking at almost 2 years since he's actually, pitched in a game, in the minor leagues. But obviously he's had some time in spring training and stuff like that. But he has to start over. I mean, it's going to be tough, and he's got to, almost prove himself again. So we'll have to see. The number 1 thing, obviously, is getting healthy, and then we'll have to go from there and kind of, relive that number 2 prospect in the organization status.
Chance Sisco, who I get to see every day, is the 7th youngest player in the Eastern League. It's a 12-team AA league. He's 21 years old, just turned 21 in the month of February. And here he is, Dean. He is leading this Eastern League in on-base percentage. It really has been a strong start of the season here for Chance.
Absolutely. Still looking for that first home run, but as you said, I mean, on base, that's key. I mean, getting on base almost half of his plate appearances so far. It's quite amazing, and batting average as well. I think he's hitting 330, upwards of that. 4 multi-hit performances in the last 6 games, and like I said, it hasn't hit a home run, hasn't had any power yet this year. But I think the key game for him, if you go back to April 22nd, he had 4 walks.
Yes,
4 walks, 0 for 0 with 4 walks, and 2 of those were against Nationals prospect, well heard of Lucas Giolito. So. I mean, it's quite impressive, and obviously with Mancini moving up to Norfolk, Sisco's kind of a little more of a vital part to the Bowie offense, and so far is showing that he can do it.
We're here with Dean Jones Jr. on our BaltimoreBaseball.com podcast here, our minor league expert. And, Dean, I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into some names that Orioles fans might not know, as the Frederick Keys. Their record is not very strong here right now, but the Keys, their bullpen has really struggled, but they've gotten some pretty good starting pitching of late. And a few recent draftees of the Orioles, guys named Matt Grimes, John Means. They're names that even the most ardent Orioles fans might not know, but they might be guys to watch out for that could start becoming names on that prospect ladder.
No question. I think both of these guys fit the Orioles' MO pretty perfectly. College pitchers who were drafted. Means was the 11th round pick in 2014, and Grimes was the 18th round pick that year. And solid arms, compiling them there and letting cream rise to the top. That's the way the organization kind of views things. And, Grimes he was just named the Carolina League Pitcher of the Week last week. And in those 2 starts, he held his opponents to 3 runs in 11 2/3 innings. But his ERA actually climbed from 1.29 to 1.75. So that goes to show you how he's been doing this year. He's ranked 2nd in the Carolina League and led Delmarva with 10 wins last year. So, like you said, he's kind of an unheralded guy. But, same thing with Means. He's tied for 5th in the Carolina League in ERA. And both of those guys, like you said, the Keys have really struggled overall. I think they have 10 wins after Tuesday night, but those guys each have 3. So that goes to show you they've pitched well. And like you said, the way to do it is do what's asked of you, and then people will notice. So ideally, the right people will start to take notice of those guys, and if they keep their success up.
Might be like back in the day, instead of a spawn insane and pray for rain, Grimes and Means, right?
Yeah, that's right, I tell you.
But there's also a few news and notes. If you look at the last day or so here around the Orioles organization, a few guys have really on the offensive side of things had some big nights.
Yeah, Daryl Alvarez in Norfolk had 6 RBIs. He was 4 for 5. Norfolk, another team that's had a little bit of struggles early as a team, but 8-0 win over Louisville. Like I said, Alvarez with the big night there. Hopefully it'll get him kind of going. Another name, too, that we talked about, unheralded guys down in Frederick, Aderlin Rodriguez, minor league signing, 24 years old in January. He actually hit his 6th home run Tuesday night and leads the team with 21 RBIs. So, obviously kind of an organizational depth guy, but, we'll have to see that he keeps that up if he can kind of turn some heads the rest of the way.
Well, Dean, thank you so much. Great job once again, and we look forward to talking again next week.
Absolutely. Same time, same place.
So that's going to do it for us today. Want to say a big thank you to our main guest, the beat writer of the Norfolk Tides, David Hall, writer for the Virginian-Pilot. And, of course, as always, a great conversation with our minor league expert here on BaltimoreBaseball.com in Dean Jones Jr. My name is Adam Pohl. This has been the Orioles Minor League Podcast on BaltimoreBaseball.com. We'll see you next week.